up, guys? Tambo here with your weekly core report. It was an amazing week last week, loaded with winners across multiple sports. Here are some of the highlights. We kick off things in the college football streets where our members have been crushing. Phil Mix Bra hit for $1,500, while Freddie 11 won $3,400. In MMA, 57 Lions had a nice ROI, turning $100 into over $1,000. And Agency Arms LLC hit for $2.9K in NHL. Just a reminder, our memberships include all sports for one price. World Cup kicks off next week too, and we will have a ton of content to help you shift. So sign up today and let's start running pure. In the NFL, RPS ran the leaderboards once again. I landed my 5th King of the Beach ticket. D. Bailey 2106 hit for $5K. J. Rex 777 won $38K. And D. Kafer shipped a 3rd live final seat. Our biggest sport last week was the NBA, where our members shipped left and right. Our NBA content has been on fire, and you can catch our daily shows for free by subscribing to our YouTube channel right now. ROI was strong in NBA last week too. Connor turned $28 into $1,700 using K-Falix Core. Chunky Blue turned $14 into $1,700. Junior turned $64 into $1,800. Chargers 0616 hit for $2K, while Brandon 2323 won over $10K. Our coordinators joined in as well, with Bobby Hare winning $14K. Mangone hit for $16K, while K-Falix shipped for $44,000. Congrats again to all our members. If you want to be featured in our weekly core report, drop your winning lineup in our Members Never Win channel in our premium Discord. If you're not a member, join now. You won't find a better value with all sports included for one low price. And while you're watching, hit that like button now. Remember, if you're not winning with us, you're watching us win. Till next time, let's keep running pure.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Run Pure Sports Showdown show. I forgot for a second who was hosting, so my apologies. I was like, because Jordan's doing the screen sharing, I'm doing the hosting. No AP here today. AP's got some things to take care of, and I'm happy to step in. And I think we picked the perfect show for me to step in too. One, the Packers are on the slate, and I'm a Packers fan, so I'm excited to talk about some Green Bay Packer football, even though it's been a little ugly this year. And then Jordan was talking before the show, and he was saying like he's got some good stuff that we want to talk about, and I kind of agree. I think we're going to have a really good show. We're going to break it down. We're going to find the winners for you. If you guys could please like and subscribe to this video. It helps us out a ton over here at Run Pure Sports, and you can check out all the content that we have going live. And let me tell you, we got a lot of content going live. We also have a World Cup preview going live today as well, so that's another thing to check out today. That's a little bit of a new piece of content. Jordan, I believe I can't see your camera right now. I don't know if that's on my end or if it's on yours.
That's on my end, unfortunately. And the camera died on me. And I don't know if it's going to come back, unfortunately. But if you can hear me and you can see my screen, I think that'll work for now. I actually just moved and I've been unpacking like nonstop the last day. I just got the office set up and I didn't realize that the camera was dead. But at least I think seeing Saber is more important than seeing my face. So if we can do that, I think we should be okay.
Okay, well, if you get a chance to maybe fix it, feel free. Simon, can you see his screen on our end? Are we good to go? Give me the okay. All right, so Simon, our producer, says we're good to go on that. So let's start talking about it. Jordan, I guess let's take it away. Let's talk about this showdown slate. I mean, at the top, obviously, some of these captains today are Henry, Rodgers, Aaron Jones. Like a lot of these guys are like, they're good plays, but like at the same time, they're not your usual captains. You know what I mean? Like typically we're not slamming in running back captain spots. Maybe this ends up being similar to that other slate, the Niners. If you remember that slate, the Niners and the Chargers, where Christian McCaffrey, Eckler, Herbert were like the main guys, which you can make the argument. It's Henry, Rodgers, and Jones. And then you have who on earth wants to play Ryan Tannehill, and who on earth wants to play Jimmy Garoppolo as the captain, right? So maybe there's some similarities there, Jordan. Give me your thoughts on that, and then kind of like start, diving in and breaking us down of how you want to kind of start talking about this slate.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's an interesting one. Classic Thursday night, mid-November, 40-point game total football game here tonight. What's interesting, though, is I think there's like a lot of names that immediately jump out here of guys that you like in that captain position. I think there's some interesting storylines at this part in the season, too. We've got Christian Watson breaking out last week, priced up quite a bit at like 11-1 in the captain spot here now, but I think he's an interesting option. Treylon Burks, who was going off or really starting to emerge early in the season, then out for the injury for a bit. Interested to see how his role continues to develop here as we hit the later part of the season. So yeah, no, I think it'll be a fun slate. I'm excited to talk about it a little bit. I know that I've been reading your tweet threads quite a bit on Twitter. We were talking about that a little bit before the start of the show. You mentioned that you're using Sabersim at least partially in building out those cores and those tweets. I'm interested to just kind of hear like how you're using it, and then maybe I can provide some advice on how Sabersim can kind of fit in terms of using that information you're giving out to the people there for their lineups.
Yeah, that's a good talking point. So Jordan, actually, I kind of get your thoughts on this. I tell people when like they kind of ask about Sabersim, I'm like, what setting should you use, right? Do you have like a key setting to use for the 150? Now I understand like you can pick like whatever settings you think is best, right? But sometimes like for me, I've noticed like, okay, like some of these are a little too like the sim diversity might be a little too crazy for me, right? So I actually typically run a lot of different setups. Like sometimes I run like 150 max like this, how it is. Sometimes I go in and I like go to the 3 max and like I'll have it with like maybe more entrance where it's like, okay, that's going to give me like maybe some like, it's going to give me some unique setups, but it's also not going to go too far off the opto, right? Like I run like a bunch of settings. I'll run the 20 max just to see what I think is looking most comfortable to me, what I like the most. First of all, what's your thoughts on that? And what kind of stuff do you run? Like, for instance, like, I don't know if you always run like, because I think it's not always just like a 10 sim diversity like you have. I think they change for each one. What's your kind of overall thoughts there on that?
Yeah, so for Showdown, it is generally going to be, you'll see for almost everything except for I think like pretty small field single entry kind of stuff, it's almost always going to be 0-0-10. And what that's actually doing with the sims is that's meaning every single lineup you're getting is the optimal lineup for a single game simulation, which is basically what we're trying to do with NFL Showdown, right? Where game's going to get played out one time. We want the optimal. So we're building lineups that are optimals for single game sims. For other sports and like classic slates for NFL, this will change a bunch. Based on whether you're talking about smaller field single entry, the larger field MME stuff. And I think matching those to the contest that you're playing is great, right? We want to take into account correlation, ownership, and diversity, but we want to do that in a way that's adjusted based on the contest we're playing. So I think that's perfect. For NFL Showdown, a lot of times what I do is I'll actually typically start with a cash build. And yes. I know AP likes to do this too. You mentioned before the show that this is something you do. This just gives you an idea. What are the raw projections saying, right? What are the cash optimal lineups? And you can kind of get an idea of what a lot of the field is going to do here based on those projections. So I'll get one of these just started here. And I just typically like to look at, even just something like the first, 200 cash optimals and just see what these are looking like to get a feel for the slate.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. I like doing, I also go and I look at ownership too. Like kind of when you ask, when I like start with my tweets where I go like, everyone's starting lineup like this. Like I like to make sure I'm like kind of shoving in like all the chalk stuff and then trying to find like, hey, maybe there's a good leverage here. Maybe there's not. And like kind of mess with that. So I don't always just take, oh, this is opto one and move on. Right. Like, so one thing that I notice here right away when I just see this is Randall Cobb will probably be in that tweet, right? Because like he is a $200 guy that a lot of people are looking to probably play today. And he's just another thing too, when I kind of do these things, Jordan, I kind of want good talking points, and like Randall Cobb at $200 is like a great talking point. On the slate. Like I want to talk about the key different things. And he's probably on the captain too, which is actually that's in like the cash stuff. I'm curious in the other runs, but I think Cobb's going to be someone obviously put in there. And then I'm assuming whoever like the chalk captain is, I'll put in, which I actually think it's probably Derrick Henry. And then I'll probably put like Rodgers in there. I wouldn't be surprised. Like that's my 3, at least that's what I'm noticing there for sure. So like one thing that I'm noticing, at least from when you run these cash optimals, and I am curious again what to do with Randall Cobb. He's going to be a big decision point at $200. What do you typically do with guys like this in this spot, Jordan? Because I like to avoid the cheap salary guys typically. And if you remember that Philip Lindsay slate, right? He was $200 and everyone wanted to slam him on their teams. he wasn't even that great. Like, and like you can get away with fading these $200 guys, and I personally like doing it. What's your kind of thoughts on maybe fading him in tournaments, and what's like kind of some of the stuff that you're seeing, like I just talked about?
Yeah. So, I mean, a couple things right off the bat. So in terms of like what I'm typically looking for in the cash build, I like to do the same thing. I like to get an idea of what are the most frequently appearing captains here. And then also what are the constructions that are showing up here a lot. And I think this is going to kind of be the very chalky construction here tonight, which is going to be Derrick Henry in the captain spot, and then overweight on Packers in the flex. So I think this 5-1 Packers with Henry in the captain spot is going to be pretty popular. And I also think that we're seeing a couple where you have 2 Titans, Henry in the captain, and then 4 Packers with Randall Cobb in there as salary relief. I think that is basically going to be the chalk construction. And that's basically what I typically want to look at here in this first cash build. In terms of what I do with those low salary guys, I'm on the same page, especially in the captain spot. I typically am a little bit cautious with very low salary captains. Part of the main reason for that for me is the way that often ends up working out with how often you're going to be duped. There's not a lot of different constructions that you can make with a very cheap salary player in the captain spot, because there's only so many higher salary players to use in the flex positions. It generally leads you to a much smaller pool of lineups that you can work from in your constructions there, unless you're willing to leave a ton of the salary on the table and you're basically just saying that Randall Cobb is just horribly mispriced and he should be way more expensive, which I don't really think is the case here. So yeah, I'm on the same page. I think it's a pretty good way to take a stand early in the process here and get a little bit more unique.
Yeah, I tend to agree with what you're saying here, Jordan, on it. I'm just not the biggest fan here of like the idea of like these cheap captains, right? It's just not something I typically do. So I'm kind of out on doing that. I mean, unless it was like Aaron Jones, right? Or like a 200, then I can understand it. But like Randall Cobb, it's a big difference for sure. But how would you do you want to go back to the homepage and kind of now, like, this is the thing that I really like to do. And this is kind of what's honed me in on figuring out what I think is best. Let's go in and like, let's just run stuff tournament wise, right? Maybe we kind of saw what's happening. One thing I like to do, Jordan, also is like, if I had to say to someone, what's your strategy on like almost every slate, right? I just gave you like a rule of thumb. My rule of thumb for like unique and sharp lineups is avoiding the cheap range. And I know every slate's different, but I would just avoid that $200, $400 range. Even like some of these 1K guys I would avoid. And I typically say, let me find a mid-range captain that maybe people aren't going to. Now, mid-range is a little bit of a loose term. Last week, my mid-range captain was Devonta Smith. Now, my ranking of it is, hey, tier 1 captains, and then there's like the tier 2. I kind of try and find what's that tier 2 captain that I can get it like maybe single-digit ownership, and then I can play some really good guys in there, and then maybe make some big fades amongst that, right? Like, one of the best things, and this was like, sometimes you see something that clicks for you, Jordan. One time it clicked for me was I saw there was a unique team in NBA Showdown that shipped everything. And Jordan, NBA Showdown, it's very hard to be unique and ship. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, absolutely. I enjoy playing NBA Showdown. I think it's a pretty fun format. I've been playing it quite a bit this season, but yeah, you pretty much have to be comfortable getting duped and sometimes getting duped a lot just because there's so few lineups that can actually win.
So the team that won was wild. It was a like either Chris Middleton or Drew Holiday captain, like, and then it had the other one with it. And it just faded Giannis. So it just maximized all the leverage on like an 80-90% Giannis and just said, I'm fading him. And then it like, so if you fade him, you're only competing against 20% of the field, right? Or like 10%. And then it makes sense to put those 2 in the captain spot. And the team looked so obvious. It was like, how on earth did this team was a solo ship? It was wild. So that's one thing that I look at is like, hey, who's a big fade I can make that I don't trust? Like, those are things that I like to look at. And now that you ran stuff,
yeah,
very interesting. How many teams you only ran 20 teams? So this is one thing I do, Jordan, and this might be wrong. I want to see 150. If you don't mind, can we like, even on the 20 max, I like to see it. Do you think that's wrong? I guess give me your opinion on that, because I just want to see more things, if that makes sense. Like more.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think that's great. And then it'll give you a little bit more diversity here. And it's very easy to change the number of lineups up here. So yeah, top 150 of our pool of 1,500 here, and we can start looking through this.
Yeah. And so the thing I noticed at first, and it's funny, this is what I something I did think could happen today. And this was like, just like my first look last night. I was just like, I wonder, I don't always do the first look action, but I happened to look and I was like, like, who's the guy that might be my captain I go to? And I thought it would be Allen Lazard. And one reason why is, and I'm curious what the ownership will be, but I think Henry's a good player. I'm not saying he's bad, but I felt like he'd be a really interesting captain that you can go to. First of all, let's look at Derrick Henry teams. This is something I like to do as well. When we pull up Derrick Henry, okay, what do they look like? And when I see them, this is one other key thing that I would do. Go to the flex spot, I guess, like the flex thing, and let's see how many. So Randall Cobb's on 73% of them. So Jordan, this is something that I noticed right away, and this is what I say. I say, if you're playing Derrick Henry, the most popular captain, what's the quickest way to make it unique? And for me, like, I don't want to make stupid galaxy brain moves, but I also want to like be smart with my lineups. Let me look at the non-Randall Cobb teams. What do those look like? Because if I play Derrick Henry and the captain, how is he unique? Getting rid of Randall Cobb is instantly unique. It's like, boom. You don't have to worry about anything else. I don't have to worry about ownership fades and all this other junk. So, Jordan, what's your thoughts on that? Do you want to kind of look through some of these lineups here?
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. And making like really good use of the filters here. So for people watching along, right, these filters can be a really good tool for doing what Mangone's talking about here, right? We filtered and saw all the lineups that have Derrick Henry and the captain and then don't have Randall Cobb. And you can see it flips the script immediately, right? The lineups at the top were Derrick Henry, Randall Cobb, and a ton of Packers. And now we get these different game scripts here where we're getting Derrick Henry, but we're getting more Titans in, right? Because a lot of those, Derrick Henry's the most expensive captain in the field. So to use him and not use the cheap chalk value in Randall Cobb, we have to play some cheaper Titans. And then all of a sudden we get that game script where the Titans are winning this game. Derrick Henry's pounding the rock in the second half, and it kind of starts to fit together. So I love that. I think this is a great angle here and a use of the tool.
Yeah, and like the first team that I see at the top, I think is really good. Like that's one I would like consider. And if Derrick Henry at the captain spot smashes, it's likely a big performance and it's likely coming through touchdowns. And Dontrell Hilliard and Austin Hooper could make a lot of sense. And one reason they could make a lot of sense is from a PPR perspective, right, Jordan? Like they could just get peppered in the pass game and Tannehill ends up having like, I don't know, like 8 or 9 DK points. And that's probably not on the winner. And all these other routes could end up working. So I like this a lot. Like, I think it's that first team is really good. One that I would look at. Now, I see this like Henry, Tannehill, Dylan, Lambeau, Woods, and Brooks. Could it be a winner? Yes, but I don't like that. So like, I typically just like keep scrolling, right? And I just it's kind of like I'm sifting through trash, right? I'm just like, oh, is there a gem in here that I can find? I don't know if it's right or wrong, but that's kind of some of the perspectives that I have looked at. Yeah. Another thing you can do, Jordan, if you take the get off the minus sign on the Cobb, I want to get your perspective on this. Now we know Derrick Henry captain is going to be super popular. Why don't we look at like the stack types he's popping up in? And are there any stack types? Like, does anything stick out to you here? Like, because one thing that I typically like to do when I look at these is I like to ask the question like, okay, the opto is telling me 4-2 is the best. So I do want to look at 4-2, but is the field doing that also, right? Like one thing I would do in baseball is I'd run Saber and I'd look at things. I'd be like, man, 5-2-1s are being pushed the most. The math is telling me that 5-2-1s make a lot of sense. And again, I know this could be overwhelming for some people watching, but basically I like to try and mix in knowing my football knowledge and my sports knowledge with this stuff. So I'm trying to say the opto's telling me to do this, but I also, I know better sometimes, right? I know some things that like make sense and don't make sense, but I want to make sure I'm using the opto. And what are some things that you notice with the numbers that kind of make sense and don't make sense? Because some of these teams I think are great, but then sometimes you look at them and you're like, they don't add up completely.
Yeah, no, I mean, so one thing that I always kind of look for is I try to look for trends in the exposures here that are coming together because of the way that salaries and projections work, but aren't really intuitive with like how you would actually want to build for upside, right? So if we look, we're seeing in our Derrick Henry lineups, most of them are actually stacked up with Packers stacks, right? And that's what we're seeing over here in the lineups too. It's Derrick Henry and then a lot of other Packers. But if we click on his name, and this is something that AP and I have been doing, right? A lot of his positive correlations are going to be to this players on his own team. It's his own defense, right? A little bit of a correlation with Tannehill, actually a little bit of a correlation with the kicker as well. And it makes sense, right? The condition or the game script where Derrick Henry captain is optimal and is going off, a lot of times is going to be one, or most likely is going to be one where the Titans are also, having success and maybe at least like leading for parts of this game, where maybe it's not a 5-1 or a 4-2 Packers stack on the other side. The reason
can you actually go back to that? Sorry to cut you off. I wanted to ask a question about it. Because I don't do this that much, and it's something I've looked at a little bit, and I probably should do more. So it's right now, I guess, because you don't have the correlation plugged in there, what it's probably doing is it's not giving us these guys, but like, I guess when you're sifting through lineups, you might be like, oh, like here's a Derrick Henry captain that's paired with Lambeau, and maybe it's Henry captain, Lambeau, and then it's 4 Green Bay Packers. And that would be a really interesting and unique, I think, team to look at. Is that kind of some of the stuff that you're using that tool to kind of figure out, like, hey, Derrick Henry captain, like this team right here, this is a great one. Now, the one thing I would be I think it actually could work is because Cobb is just that cheap $200 value, but like this is a Randall Cobb team, Jordan, that I can actually get behind personally.
Yeah.
Because no one's going to play Randall Cobb at 200, right? With the 4 Packers then. And I think like that, like Henry at the top, like I think that team is absolutely awesome. Like what's your thoughts on that process? Is that kind of how you use that tool that you just mentioned? Because that's something you just said that I was like, wow, I don't do that. And I think I kind of should do this more.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think another way you could do that here is basically, just saying that you're not going to pair Henry captain in lineups where you're overweight on Packers in the flex, right? I think that's another way of just saying, if I'm using Henry in the captain, which is going to be the chalkiest captain, I'm using it in a way where I'm playing a game script that's not going to be popular, right? The Packers are favored in this game. So playing Henry plus 4 Titans or Henry plus 3 other Titans is going to be a little bit of a more unique way. But yeah, I think this is great as well. You could also, if you wanted to go one step further, is just see like, hey, what lineups do I have in the pool here where it's Henry, Lambeau, no Cobb, and we could actually go one step further if you wanted here, and even say, must have a Packers stack. We have to jump over to the pool here, but we can start doing that, right? So we're going to see 4 Packers, Henry captain, Lambeau, and no Cobb, right? So we're getting pretty specific. And if you like one of these lineups, like if one really stands out to you, we can just go ahead and hit this lock button and basically just add it to our pool here and make sure that we have it in our final set of lineups.
Yeah, and then when you lock it, it goes in the lineups right up top, and then you can kind of click on those, and then you go to download lineups, and I think that just so people can see and understand, that's how you do it, right? And another thing I try to tell people, Jordan, like, and I think people I think it's like super important. Do not just go at like 7:00 tonight, and be like, oh, let me start my process. Like, dive in now. And also, if you think you made a mistake, right? Like you feel like a donkey, like, man, I could have done this better. And it's like 11:30 at night. And maybe you got to go to sleep and go to work the next day. Or maybe you're someone like me that stays up a little bit later. Go in and like redo the slate, right? Like practice, because practice makes everything better, right? You're always going to improve that way. Sabersim is like, it's not like, the gym where it's not like, maybe it's 9 to 5 and you can't get in. Like this is open 24/7. You can be on this at 4 a.m. and look at things. You can look at the actual score that was of your exact pool that you went through. Now, the one problem with that is if you run a pool of 500 teams, yeah, no kidding. You might have a team that's really amazing, but maybe understand why you did it. These are little things that I actually have been doing a lot more and have been very valuable to me. And I just like to mention to people who are like watching these Saber shows, because I think it's super important. And I don't know if it's something that you do in your process. I'm sure you're someone that kind of reviews things a little bit for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. I always recommend, start at least, especially if you're new or you're trying out a new process, give yourself a little bit of time to do that rather than being right up against lock and trying to make all these changes. I also think there's cool things that you can do here to kind of set yourself up for success or prime yourself for the slate later, right? Like if we've kind of decided that on this particular slate, we're going to fade Randall Cobb here at the captain spot, we can start curating our player pool now. That'll be saved when we come back to it later. We can also do cool things like starting to build some of these rules here. So, one that popped into my head that we might want to do based on just what we've been talking about here is set up a group. And we're just going to say, use no more than one, and basically just put Henry in it at captain and put Cobb in it at flex. And I'll search for him here so I can find him quickly. So we'll put Cobb in. And now we're basically going to say, if we're using Derrick Henry, we're not using Cobb in the flex spot, and we can save this. This will be here when we get back as well, when the projections update and things like that throughout the day. We'll have this rule, and we can keep going, right? We can keep kind of figuring out what the other angles we want to do, what player combinations we want to avoid, so that when we come back, we just refresh our projections. We've got some of the rules in there, and we're good to go.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to go about it. If you are someone that's MMEing and just like you're uploading the CSV, I mean, that's great. One thing I'll say from my perspective, I've been trying to really work on my Showdown game, get a lot better, improve. I don't do those rules just because I want to kind of like sift through things. Just I don't want to like leave everything off the table. I think that's a great rule though. Like if I was actually like sitting there and just uploading the script, I would want to put those rules in, right? I think that is important to do. But if you're someone like, I have guys that are like hand builders, right? And these are some of the people I'm trying to like convert and get like, hey, use an optimizer more. Like, if you're someone that hand builds, you can hand pick your lineups, right? You can be like, oh, I like this team, and like the math says it's good. You are in a way still hand building to a degree by doing that, right? You're just not sitting there and plugging in. You're hand picking your lineups, which is something that I like to do, and I've definitely been doing a lot more of. So that's the way. If you have not signed up for Sabersim and haven't used it, listen, like, yes, I'm definitely known as more of a hand builder, but that is how I kind of use it. And I loved using it in that way. And you could hand pick them by just locking them in, like Jordan said. I do want to go and Jordan, I do want to go and look at the what's it called? I want to look at the run we had before with like 150 lineups, and I want to look at the Lazard teams, because that's like the guy, I'm doing my thread today. I got to do that probably in like a couple hours. That's the guy I'm keying in on, is going to be the guy I look at. So let's dive in and like look a little bit at these and see. And right off the bat, that team is interesting. And I know Randall Cobb is a little bit of an anomaly. Typically when I build my captain wide receiver teams, I like the idea of, if I have a captain in the wide receiver spot, like, what are the chances, especially in a lower scoring game, which I think this game will be a bit lower scoring, what are the chances another receiver is going to be in the lineup? So I typically want to steer away from Cobb, but on the flip side, he's only $200. He's a little bit of an anomaly, but he's only showing up on 46% of teams. So let's do this. Let's look through like the first 10 teams, or it's 13 lineups. So let's look through the 13 teams and see what's one that sticks out to you. I mean, that first one I thought wasn't bad. Are any other ones that stick out to you? Because I don't mind playing Henry and Hilliard. I know some people aren't as comfortable with that, but I think that's not a bad, unique way. I don't mind that team a little bit.
This one jumps out to me. What I was kind of looking for here. So definitely interested in just fading Cobb. I'm actually kind of talking myself into just a full Cobb fade here completely. So I like the idea of no Cobb in this lineup. I also was looking for one kind of like you mentioned. I actually don't hate this one either, where we're just not playing any of those super cheap guys, where we're not, lowest salary guy in the lineup is Hilliard at 3,200 here. I kind of like both of these constructions.
Yes, I love that one you're looking at there. I mean, that one's really good. You can also change, like, go back down. I like that one, but even this like Lazard 3-3. So what you could do is, you could change, I'm trying to think the salary. You could easily change Mason Crosby to Josh Lambo, right? Like, sometimes I even like go in and I'm like, this is a great team. And this is where you can show that tool that we've looked at before. If you wanted to go Burks, you could. I'm not saying you should, but you could. But sometimes I just say, hey, I like Lambo a little bit more on this construction, and I'm going to put Lambo in there instead, right? And I just plug him in instead, and I kind of call it a day. You can see these upgrades that you can go for your lineups. What's your thoughts on that? Because this is like a nice 3-3 that I think is interesting. And I think, yes, the Crosby thing does make sense. But if I'm playing Derrick Henry in the flex and I'm playing Hilliard, likely those running backs are kind of churning it on the ground a bit. They're doing well, and maybe they just stall out. And yes, Derrick Henry is likely in the flex spot today. Another thing that I think I'm going to do when I show my thread, Jordan, is it's kind of like Jalen Hurts, which I've done kind of recently. Jalen Hurts captain is the optimal way that most people will go on the Eagles slates. And the optimal way to go today is Derrick Henry. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put Derrick Henry. I'm maybe not going to play him in the captain as much. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put him in the flex. And I'm not fading him. I'm not going to be a donkey. I'm going to make sure he's on there, because I think he is going to be one of the top 6 raw scorers. And based on the salary, I think you will need him. Like, I am 100% playing him, whether it's in the captain or the flex. I will not be fading him today. What is your thoughts on that? Because I know obviously some of the guys that run like these lineups, they kind of say, oh, you're not going to fade like the 80% guy. You could take a chance. And you're someone that I know sometimes like puts like a little cap on your pool. What are you kind of doing with the Henry situation today?
Yeah, I think just based on his raw projection here, I will probably be in a similar boat where between captain usage and in flex usage, I'm at or very close to 100%. I think it's hard to know right at the moment where I'll end up there, but I like that angle too. I think those full fades of some of those guys, right? We get it with Lamar Jackson whenever he's on the slate too, or Christian McCaffrey is another name that comes to mind, where the guys are just projected so highly that it's almost impossible to completely fade. You're playing for a very narrow game script. That especially if we're talking about doing something for like a 3 max build here or 5 lineups or something like that, I would probably just play him in the flex and get different at the captain spot.
Yeah, and again, Jordan, I don't come from the 150 lineup guy, right? Like,
Right.
I am definitely, again, I'm someone that I am not out here playing a million lineups in Showdown. I'm definitely playing less lineups. I've seen a lot of improvements in my process over the past, I'd say 2-3 months, but I want to keep getting better. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. So I firmly believe it's very good. And I think I'm doing very well with it. I mean, the other day I had a team that was the only difference of me losing was I had Ayuk in the captain versus, Carter. Like, I just had the wrong captain, you know what I mean? Even though I had the other guy in the flex. So I definitely have seen a lot more teams of mine get towards the top and been building some really good teams. And this is some of the things that I've been doing in my process that I really like to do. So Jordan, I guess let me ask you this. Maybe it's something to look at when we look at those 150 lineups all together, right? We don't have to sit through those Zard teams anymore. We kind of talked about that. What are some things just staring at the pool from like a bird's eye view above that you notice that you're like, hey, I noticed this with the teams, right? Maybe you're catching something that I don't normally like to see, like typically see. What's kind of your thoughts on just staring at the pool from a captain and flex perspective?
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I was kind of doing behind the scenes here while you were talking is I was just experimenting with basically what does a Randall Cobb fade look like? And maybe we're not doing that in 150 lineups, but I just kind of wanted to see how things were looking and how viable that is here. So, I mean, I think one thing that I like to do is, so what I did is I crossed off Cobb from the captain and I crossed him off from the flex. And I like to just see how far down into the pool of 150 do we have to get to do that? So what we're seeing here is the bottom lineup in our 150, his lineup 308 of 1,500, right? That's pretty good. These are still, I mean, that is a top, what is that? That's a top 20%-ish lineup from the top of our pool. And that's fading the value chalk that I think is going to show up in quite a few lineups just because of what he makes work here. So to me, that's saying that fading Randall Cobb, like it's what I was kind of thinking about a second ago here, is actually a pretty viable path here. We could easily build 150, much less, 3 lineups where we're fading him completely. So I was also going to go in and look and just see, since you mentioned it, like how much are we getting some of these very low salary guys in here? Yes. Are we getting to a lot of like, $200 Cody Hollister, 600 Mercedes Lewis here? And we're not. So I actually kind of like the way that these constructions are working here. It seems like a balanced build where you're fading some of that really cheap value is a good way to get unique here. I did want to just quickly call back. You said something that I think is just like perfect of the way that you kind of think about Sabersim when you're playing just a small number of lineups, and that's hand picking rather than completely hand building, right? That's essentially what we've been doing here is we're like, hey, what does a Lazard captain lineup where we fade Randall Cobb look like? And instead of trying to build that lineup from scratch on DraftKings or something like that, we're using Sabersim, we're using the optimal lineups from the Sims to help us get there. And you can see if we were trying to narrow down to like 3 lineups here at the very end, those 2 lineups, the one we edited earlier where we put Lambo in instead of Mason Crosby, and the one we picked out where it's a Henry build with Lambo and 4 Packers are still here, right? So we could let that final lineup just be one that Sabersim kind of picks for us or pick it ourselves, but we're basically, hand picking a 3 max portfolio here instead of hand building from scratch. And I think that's just like the perfect way to use Sabersim for, smaller field 3 max single entry kind of stuff where you're still taking advantage of the sim. So just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I that's definitely what I've noticed and I really like doing, and I've done in the past, right? But I'm doing it more. I have one friend, actually, this is funny, where we're talking about the 2-game NBA slate last night, right? And who knows if he's listening, but I'm gonna make fun of him here for a second. But he basically said, oh, I really like this team. And I was like, yeah, like you built Opto too, just so you know, like that's what it's a great team. It's not a bad team, but I'm just letting you know, you built Opto too. Like I found that team. I thought it looked great, but like, I didn't want to play Opto 2 on a 2-game slate, right? Like for like tournaments where I'm trying to like hit the first place, like nothing wrong with that. I just didn't want to play Opto 2 on a 2-gamer, but it was a good team. I was like, yeah, it gets like all those things that are great for sure. And it'll probably be duped, and I'm sure it was duped. But and again, I think actually, let's go to this one. What's your thoughts on like the whole being duped and not being duped? I'm in like the camp of, and I think BT has talked about this a little bit more on some of the shows, like, you obviously aren't trying to just have every single team be the most unique, like in the world, but like you're not trying to run a team that 800 people are on, right? Like you want to make sure there's some uniqueness to your lineups, correct?
Yeah, Yes, definitely. I feel like this is something we could probably talk about for like hours because I think there's
forever.
a lot of complexity here. I mean, I think you should not be ignoring it, right? You should be building your lineups with some mind to how many other people are going to play that lineup because if you're trying to beat out, especially if you're playing the larger field stuff, and actually that's a good point. I think it's more important the larger the contest you're playing. If we're playing the 3 max kind of stuff, you're playing against such a smaller field that your risk of getting duped is a lot lower and the effect it has on your profitability is lower. If you're trying to play the millie or really large field tournaments, you've got to pay attention to it because you're trying to beat so many lineups anyway. You don't want to share that pot when you finally, hit the optimal with 1,000 other people. So I think it's important. The way I kind of try to think about it in a very general sense is I'm not trying to force all my lineups to be unique, but I'm trying to build lineups that should be duped more than they're going to be. So if I'm going to play a lineup that is, going to be duped by 50 other people, I want to feel like that's a lineup that 200 people should be playing. Or if I'm going to play a lineup that's going to be duped by one other person, I want that to be a lineup that I feel like, 5 or 10 other people should be playing it if everybody was playing like perfectly optimally. So that's kind of how I think about it. I know that's a difficult thing to quantify sometimes, but that's generally what's going through my head.
So let me ask you a counter question. That's like, it might not be the easiest to answer, but like,
yeah.
How do I do that in Saber, right? Like I'm watching and I'm like, I do Sabersim and I think this is cool. How do I do that? Like, and again, this is not an easy question to answer. So I'm curious to get your perspective of how you kind of try to get there. I think some of the ways, again, I've tried to do it manually is like, hey, most Derrick Henry captains are probably in a 3-3-4-2. Like, I think Derrick Henry's not the best example. Jalen Hurts is a great example. He's mostly in 3-3s. He's mostly in 4-2s. He's mostly in 5-1s. But are there routes where I could play him in like a 2-4 where it's like Hurts in the captain with like maybe a Dallas Goedert, and then like he gets a rushing touchdown, he throws one to Goddard, right? They kick some field, like the other team, then it's a more of a low scoring game. Maybe he racks a bunch of rushing yards. Those are ways that I look to do it. What are some things that you do? Because again, people might ask about, hey, maybe a Saber score a way to do it. What's kind of your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think that is in a large part where the cash build starts to come into play for me. And what's useful about the cash build, right, is, the cash build is essentially mimicking how a lot of different people that you are playing against are going to build their lineups, right? This is what are traditional optimizers that optimize purely based on average projection. What are they going to do? And, another way of thinking about this is like, it's going to be very hard for someone using a traditional optimizer to get off of these constructions. So these are the ones that you kind of want to avoid. And I think, the first level of this is what are the popular captains, right? Who are the guys that are showing up a lot here? Who are the popular flex value pieces? What are the popular constructions? But the one thing that I like that you were mentioning here that you're doing is going one step further and actually starting to look at the combinations, right? So if you have identified that Derrick Henry is a chalky captain, right, and you want to play some Henry, which is perfectly fine, right? I probably want to play some Captain Henry here tonight. What is the chalky way that he's going to be combined with other players, and how do you get different, right? We're seeing, Henry is paired with in the first 200 cash optimals, 92% of the time Henry is paired with Cobb. So we identified that one early in the show, right? Splitting those two up and making sure that we don't play those two together is an easy way to go. But the other thing that's popular, right? I know I'm repeating myself from a little bit here. Let's actually take a different example, right? Because we've done Henry already. Let's do. Let me hear real quickly.
I'm assuming the next best one would be Rodgers, probably, right?
Yeah. So let's take a look at Rodgers lineups and just kind of see.
One thing to call out with Rodgers lineups, if you play Rodgers in the captain, they are probably going to have a lot of pass catchers typically. I'm curious if they do or don't, right? Like that's obviously Randall Cobb is one that pops in a bunch, which could be right or wrong. But like one thing you could do is, I know he's on 100% right now. You could easily maybe do a Rodgers captain lineup, and then maybe it's paired with like Aaron Jones and like Lazard instead. And then like from there, it's a 3-3 or a 4-2 that like, that's the way the Rodgers teams are going to be built the most. They're going to be built the most as 3-3s and 4-2s more than likely. And if you decide to, and you put in Jones and Lazard, like, how do we not have them with Cobb? Now, obviously on this one, they're 100%. And also another thing I like to do, Jordan, sometimes is like when I kind of build these out, like, you know how you just narrowed it down to Lazard and Jones? Mm-hmm. I sometimes look at that and I'm like, there might be a reason why this isn't working. Like, and I look at them and I'm like, okay, like abort, like let's abort ship, right? Abandon. I don't want to do this anymore. And that is, at least I've done research and I've been given answers of like what I think is right and what is wrong. What's kind of your thoughts on that? And how do you want to talk about this Rodgers setup and what we want to look at?
Yeah. So in the cash build, I really want to just see like what are the most common lineups here, right? What is the field going to do? So I think what we're seeing here, one thing I want to look at is, so Rodgers obviously paired very frequently with, a stack of his own team. He's also very commonly paired with Derrick Henry. So I think there's kind of two interesting angles here that you could take that would be playing Rodgers captain, which is a popular captain, in a way that is a little bit more unique. One would be playing Rodgers with a heavier game stack of Tennessee. Where you're basically playing an angle instead where, the reason Rodgers captain works out is because they're playing from behind and they have to throw the ball a lot. Another one that I think is interesting is actually, and, maybe you take this is a little bit too far based on what we talked about earlier, but you play Rodgers captain and you actually do fade Derrick Henry and you say, the Titans basically or Derrick Henry gets game scripted out of the game because the Packers go way up early and Rodgers, has a great game or something like that. And the reason I'm on those kinds of game scripts, right? I'm not just making it up on the fly here, is because those are where I think the most leverage is, right? Rodgers is most frequently paired, heavily with Henry and also very commonly with stacks of his own team. So if I wanted to then play that particular angle, I think that's a unique way to do it. So one other thing that I'll mention here really quickly is I think you can also, look at combinations of players that have a very slight negative correlation, because players, other people in the contest typically don't like to use those players together. So one that jumps to mind here tonight that I think potentially has a lot of value is Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon together, right? Two running backs on the same team. They're probably going to have, okay. So in the Sims, they actually have a very slightly positive correlation, but I think in general, the intuition is that same team running backs are going to be negatively correlated.
Yes.
I think that's a good way to get unique too, is play those combinations of players that other people just aren't going to want to do because of the perception of the correlation there.
And it worked the other day, right? With Robinson and Gibson. Now they were obviously leading, but one thing to just note about the Packers, one, I'm a Packers fan, so I'll just say this. You could easily see Rodgers throw touchdown passes to Aaron Jones, right? Mm-hmm. And not only that, you can kind of see these scripts make some sense because they can just get up and listen, both teams, if they are leading, they are going to establish the run. Even Green Bay, they are going to run. Matt LaFleur, when they are up 17-3, 17-10 in the third quarter with 2 minutes left, you are going to see them run the ball and then look for opportunities to Rodgers to take shots, like on like a 3rd and 5, maybe on a play action or something. They're going to run the ball. They're going to establish it. It's going to be one of those games, either side. Now, the only way it doesn't is if the game just really starts shooting out early and both teams are just carving up the secondaries. And they're like, okay, we need to lean into this more because that's working. And it just becomes a shootout in that way. That's how it would end up going. And one thing that you said that I thought was really good was kind of just going through and thinking about hey, Derrick Henry, maybe I don't play him with Rodgers. Now, you need to think about the game script, though, which is what you said. And I think that is a way that I try to build out my lineups where I look at them. Hey, this could be a big fade, but if I am making this big fade, let me make sure I'm doing it with the right game script. Or maybe it's hey, maybe I am playing Rodgers and Henry together still, but now how can I make it a fade in a different spot? You got to find one spot to make a pivot, in my opinion. This is what I want to do now, because I know we ran the cash builds. Let's run Rodgers. We don't have to lock him in the captain, right? Let's just run some Rodgers teams, but not with the GBP. We want to do it with the GBP setup, right? We don't want to have it with the cash. So you have it there. So yeah, let's look at those ones. There's 8 of them right now, which I'm fine with looking at these 8. What's some, unless you want to expand it a little bit more, what's some things you want to look at here with the Rodgers teams?
Yeah. So, did I lose it? Hang on. Let me get it back on here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, again, so I think the most interesting things that I'd be looking at is how viable or does a Rodgers captain where I'm fading Henry work, right? Or what do those kinds of lineups look like here? And I'd probably be poking through and kind of taking an eye on here. I think these are kinds of the constructions that I'm looking at, right? Where we're fading Henry because the Titans fall behind in this particular game script and they have to throw the ball. So what do we get here? We get Ryan Tannehill, 2 pass catchers here. In this one, we get Ryan Tannehill and Treylon Burks, who is probably one of my favorite plays on the slate here. He really was coming on at the start of the season before he got hurt. So I think his salary's a little low for where the upside is. So we're getting those kinds of game scripts. I like those a lot. The other one that I'd be looking at here in particular is kind of the reverse, where we're not playing the Packers get ahead and force the Titans to throw the ball and game script Derrick Henry out, but actually instead that like it's Aaron Rodgers falling behind and he has to throw the ball a ton. So we might go in and see, what does a lineup with Aaron Rodgers, Tennessee 4-stack, and maybe, multiple pass catchers or skill position players on Tennessee showing up there. So that's probably the two ways I would go through it. Just looking at like where these lineups are in the pool and on a very quick glance, I think I actually prefer the angle instead where it's Rodgers and no Henry. So I'd probably go back here. And if I just wanted to like pick out a single lineup from this, I'd probably go back to that view here. My computer's slowing down a little bit on me and go that way.
I think those are good points that you brought up. And like, listen, sometimes you can look at these and like, oh man, we looked at some of these right now and I'm like, I don't know if I like them. You know what I mean? Like, and I'll just like, again, like maybe I'll be like, this isn't what I want to do. And again, if you're playing less lineups, like if you're playing 150, sure, maybe you'll take some stabs and you'll click the lock on it and you'll move on. But sometimes I look at like, and I mean, I tell you, I sift through teams. Like I am sitting there just going through and trying to figure out, hey, what sticks out? And when it pops out, then I'm like, okay, I kind of take a picture of it and I put it in this section where I save them. I have like a whole pile of teams. And then when it gets down to the end, I'm like, okay, like I don't got time anymore. And I didn't lose this team. And I got like a saved screenshot of it all. So you can also lock them if you'd like to, but I like to like just take like kind of a screenshot and I run through a lot of different stuff. So, but everyone has their own process, right? Sometimes people ask me, what's your process? And like, they want to hear like, my step-by-step, like my process is probably different from what you like to do as a process. We're all different people, right? Like we just act in different ways, things we like to do, things we don't like to do. Listen, I have watched Big T's process in person. Like I've seen it. I can't do it. Like it's now I've gotten it where it's a little, I should say it's closer to his, but I've definitely taken some tips by just watching him and like trying to like let the opto do more work, which I feel like he's done for sure. But what I'm getting at is I've seen Big T literally show up like we got lunch and he shows up and in 10 minutes he makes NASCAR teams. Like I can't do that. Like I can't. It's just, it wouldn't work for me. It just can't. So make sure you're just kind of doing things that work for your process, right? Maybe it's setting rules ahead of time. Maybe it's running the slate at 11 a.m., right? I mean, you have you might have a 9 to 5 that you got like, maybe it's during lunchtime. You spend some time looking at some stuff and then you obviously have to make some changes later. I think that's key things to do with your process. Anything else you want to kind of discuss, Jordan, or look at here that we haven't looked at yet?
No, I think that's a good point, right? And if you're watching the stream, maybe you don't take all of this that we've kind of provided here, but there's little pieces of it and you think, hey, I could incorporate that into my process somewhere. You also don't have to play the same angles, right? A lot of these are examples here. If you've got a different game script in mind, you can use the same process we've outlined here to get there. I mean, for building out kind of a 3-max pool, I kind of like what we arrived at here, right? We took the Lazard lineup here. We had kind of a more unique approach on a Derrick Henry captain build here. And then I like, this was the lineup that stood out to me, right? You said you'll go through and look for lineups that just kind of stand out. This is the one with Rodgers captain that I think is unique. That is a pretty cool build as well. Fades Henry completely, gets Ryan Tannehill with just Treylon Burks, who's my favorite Titans pass catcher tonight, for Packers on the other side. I like this one. So
what is go back to that team?
Yeah.
What is Aaron Jones' price?
Let's take a look here. At flex, right?
Like get rid of Alan Lazard. Can we make that change? I bet we can't, but I'm curious.
No, he's 11-2. Okay. So
yeah, see, these are things I look at. Like, you see the 1,200, I'm like, can I get him? I kind of get curious by that. Okay, cool. I just wanted to check that because I thought that team was awesome for sure. If you did get Aaron Jones, then what does it get you to?
I mean,
it gets you to Lambeau, the double kicker. I don't mind double kicker than other people, but you could even put Hilliard in there, which I don't hate. Hilliard wouldn't be the worst because he is in there a little bit more with trailing. And yes, you are fading Derrick Henry, which is scary for sure. I know Jason says Cobb captain literally gets you everything. Like my problem with Cobb captain teams, one, he has to have that big performance. And two, if he does, well, when people play Cobb captain, you're just not unique, right? Because everyone just plugs in the flex guys, right? Like they plug in the same team that you're plugging in, right, Jordan?
Exactly. Yep. I was going to say that, right? Like, yeah. Cobb captain gets you everything. everyone gets that, right? That's the very easy build. And you're right. You're not shooting for, in that case, like you're not shooting for Cobb to score whatever his projection here in the captain is, right? 8.9 captain points. You need him to basically be the optimal captain and probably, score 15, something like that. And then you're not getting paid off for how rare that situation is. So, I mean, probably what's going to happen here with how me and AP's luck has been on this show the past couple of weeks is Cobb's going to go off at the captain spot here now. But I like the idea of fading those cheap captains in Showdown most of the time.
Same. And one thing, I guess, go back to like a clean run again if you can. I think it's, I guess do that real quick. There's two more things I want to touch on, and it'll be pretty quick, and then we'll get on out of here. One, when you kind of run these, and I guess it's only showing one team right now. Is it going to do the 150? I guess shortly it'll pop up here.
Yeah, I have a lot of edits here now in this build as we've been working through. So it takes a little bit longer to make that jump from 3 to 150, but it should just take a second. I think my computer's slowing down a little bit on me, but there we go.
There we go. All right. So like one thing that I personally look at when these are ran is I like to stay towards the top, right? Like I'm like, okay, Tanyan captain, Lazard, Henry, Hilliard, like Burks, and then like there's a drop off, right? Burks to Woods, I see a drop off. So like I might not dive as much when I do my 3-max stuff. I might not dive into these lower captains as much. Like, for instance, Aaron Jones was someone that I personally thought was going to be someone that I wanted to play in the captain a lot. I'm not as excited to play Aaron Jones in the captain looking at this. Now, listen, it's 2:00 Eastern, basically. That could change in like 6 hours when I rerun it before the games. But that is someone that I came into this thinking I might play as much in captain, and I might not play as much. Now, he is probably more in the pool, which I think is interesting, and then that might maybe put him more in contention for me, but I definitely want to look at that. One last thing I want to do. I want to do it for the hand in the dirt guy, right? Let's say you're like, I know the game script today. Derrick Henry captain is going to be the winner, right? Like, I know it. How can I build in Sabersim? Let's go in. Let's go to the home page, or let's like a whole clean run, Jordan, just so it helps your computer out. Let's lock in Derrick Henry in the captain spot. Just hit the lock button. I know he's going to be a smash tonight. Doesn't matter. And let's run tournament setups and see what happens. And then from there, let's say you're someone, again, hand in the dirt guy. You're like, Henry's captain. He's going to be on the winner. And Titans win 28 to 10. Now, you could have went in and showed it at the top. I don't know if you want to go back and do that.
Yeah, I'll do that real quick.
Yeah, let's do that. I think hand in the dirt guy would love this. Like, that's definitely something that we've seen success at. Our guy Stevie Boyd did. So let's put 28 to 10. Yeah, let's do that. And now we apply the changes. And Jordan, what's happening when it applies the changes right here, right now?
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're going into the database of sims we have for this game, and we're looking at only the subset of sims where on average the Titans score 28 points and the Packers score 10, and then we're adjusting all the player projections to match that particular game script. So you can see, right, let's look at the flex so we can see the base projections, right? Henry's projection in those kinds of games goes from 20 points to 26.4. And we're going to see here, same deal on some of these other guys, especially some of the Packers, right? Aaron Rodgers is dropping from just a hair under 17 points to 13. And we're getting that game script. So
let's not lock Derrick Henry captain, because like we did this portion. And then now let's see, and you could do the lock if you want, but I think let's run it like this and just see what happens. Maybe like, maybe we don't get Henry in the captain as much as we think. That was something I just wanted to see. You decided it's a 28 to 10 setup. Now, if you think it's just Derrick Henry captain, go hit the lock button on him. I don't think it's bad, but this is how you can predict game scripts, literally using an optimizer and using Sabersim, which, again, if you guys haven't used it, you should sign up. And also, please hit that like, subscribe to the channel, guys. Helps us out a ton. I didn't say it a lot during this show. Should have said a little bit more. Maybe Simon will get upset, but don't make him upset. We've been talking about some great stuff here. So I want you guys to please hit that like, help us out over here at Run Pure Sports. So yeah, what do you see here, Jordan?
Yeah, so I did build a little bit of a smaller pool, just 500 lineups here for the sake of time, but top 150, right? Almost 75% Derrick Henry, a little bit of Ryan Tannehill in there, and then a mix of some of these other guys, mostly Titans, but Lazard, Christian Watson pop up here, right? Matches the game script that we were talking about. If we look over at the team stacks, we
what
can see.
Stacks do we get? That's what I was curious the most of. What kind? So we're getting 4, 2, and 5 1s, right? We're getting some 3 3s, which that's something I would notice. It's a 28-10 game, and we're getting a bunch of 3 3s still. That's kind of shocking, right?
Yeah, what I would expect is that, So what I think probably is Rodgers, the pass catcher, and then the cheap Cobb value. I'd be curious here if we just X out Cobb And again, right, this is how you could be doing this, is using these filters, seeing what different kinds of constructions make sense. Let's X Cobb out and then see what the stack types look like. 3-3 drops to just 7%. So basically, there you go. So,
but that's a great way to use the tool, right? And this is just something I wanted to look at. And again, I'm trying to talk to, yes, there's people that use 150 lineups and they know how to do this stuff, but I'm trying to talk to the guy that doesn't use this as much and wants to kind of get involved in it and like try to learn. Because again, I'm still learning. I'm learning every single day. And I learn stuff on this show, just literally talking to you right now. And it's helped me, and I'm going to use it in my process going forward. The one thing I'm going to use is clicking on that correlation thing, right? I'm going to look at like, hey, like click on like Derrick Henry. What correlates with it? What doesn't? And then I might say, wow, Lambo correlates with it more than I thought. I might look for a Derrick Henry captain with a Lambo and then 4 Packers. That is something that's in my brain right now that I want to be looking at later on that I'll be using. Guys, again, please hit that like, subscribe to the channel. You know, I didn't say it earlier, but please hit it for us. It helps us out a ton. Also want to mention, we got some content coming up for you guys, and then we're going to get on out of here. We have a nice little World Cup Showdown preview this afternoon, so you do want to watch that. Going to be awesome. It's DC. He'll be breaking it down with Rubio Dimes, talking about that. So you want to check all out. We're going to have tons of World Cup content. You sign up now. You don't have to buy some World Cup package. You get everything over here at Run Pure Sports. You'll have Sabersim be able to use with the World Cup stuff, I believe, Jordan, right? That'll probably be all up, and we'll have our stuff ready for the people.
Yes, that's right. I mean, so at the moment, unfortunately, we don't have the soccer sims, but we will have the optimizer up that you can use with the Run Pure projections and build lineups that way. We do want to get soccer sims out in the future. Just weren't ready to have it up for World Cup, unfortunately, there.
Cool. I mean, still will be helpful stuff to be able to use that. We'll have tons of great content for you guys. We also have the NBA rundown that Spread does every single day, so you want to check that out. We got Talking Touchdowns show. That'll be tomorrow. You don't want to miss out on that. We don't have any NBA stuff today, but listen, we have NBA pretty much every day. So you do not want to miss out on the Hardwood show. You don't want to miss out on the Final Countdown show. Absolutely awesome. And that's why you got to subscribe to the channel. Tells you when you go live. And also, if you don't want to get annoyed with notifications, because listen, I get enough notifications on my phone. I don't need to be notified. I know when the shows are. I just pop on YouTube. Even though I got the bell not on, which you can take that off if you want to. It's always at the top of my page. So it's very convenient, right? I type in youtube.com and boom, it's at the top. I just listen to the show, hang out with the guys, and get those winners. So that is going to wrap it up for us, those guys. Thanks a lot for joining. For me, Mangone and Jordan, we will see you guys later.